Can Luna go back to $100? Heck, even $1 and make you a millionaire? The answer is no. If it ever does go back to $1, then they would have to do like a reverse coin split, and the millions you just bought would turn into a few hundred. I'm pretty confident about this too, given that I called the LUNA UST crash months before it happened. Either way, I recommend all investors to proceed with caution. Just because it has survived thus far doesn't mean it can't come crashing down all of a sudden. In this video, I'm gonna share 20 new takeaways and predictions about LUNA and UST. These takeaways range from Do Kwon's behavior, fake rumors that have been floating around, and what this means for other coins that you may hold. Alright, number 1, there's been a lot of fake news and rumors floating around. For example, there was a rumor that Citadel and BlackRock were the anti-crypto institutions behind the attack on LUNA and UST. Heck, even Charles Hoskinson shared this rumor on his Twitter account. Turns out it was not true because both entities publicly stated that it wasn't them and they've never even touched UST before. I believe them because if you look at the context around what they do, it doesn't even make sense for them to do this. So I recommend that everyone be highly skeptical about what you hear and look for proof before you believe something. Number 2, regulation is coming whether or not we like it. There was an unprecedented amount of wealth destroyed by this LUNA UST collapse, and you can bet that regulators are not happy about it. Janet Yellen, our Treasury Secretary, came out and said that stablecoins pose a risk to our financial system, and she straight up pointed to the UST fiasco as proof.
Now, one area where Republicans and the White House might be able to work together is on stablecoins. There's a lot of concern over the lack of transparency in the underlying assets. Both sides today said they want to work on legislation that would create a sensible federal framework, and that legislation could happen this year.
Honestly, I've never been a big fan of regulation for crypto, but this actually makes kind of sense. You just can't go out there calling something a stablecoin when it loses its peg so easily and it wrecks your average investor in the process. Number 3, I would steer clear of any arrogant founder like Do Kwon in the future. We've seen so many times before the market humbling an arrogant founder like him. Before the collapse, he was mocking his critics and skeptics by calling them poor. He also made million-dollar bets against his critics, betting them that they're wrong. Well, it looks like he was the one that was wrong, and he looks like a fool now. So in the future, if you come across another crypto project with an arrogant founder, I would recommend avoiding it. Charles. Number 4, please keep an open mind to criticisms of your favorite projects, because critics may have a point and they may turn out to be right. There were so many lunatics out there that closed their ears and cried FUD when they saw the criticism. Well, that costed them dearly. So the takeaway is don't get biased by your own bags and fall to groupthink. Instead, think for yourself and look at all the facts without letting emotions cloud your judgment. Number 5, algorithmic stablecoins or Algo stables are looking like a complete failure. It looks like they will never work, not in any capacity. I actually remember people tweeting that Algo stables were a failed experiment months ago, but others wrote them off as Ethereum maximalists hating on a new competitor. Turns out they were right though, and UST is yet another example in the large graveyard of Algo stablecoins. I for one will never touch an Algo stable now and in the future. Number 6, I'm also bearish on projects trying to do something similar as LUNA UST. There were so many projects that were trying to copy their model because of the massive growth they had. I'm talking about projects like Waves with their USDN, Tron with their USDD, Kava's USDX, and Near's USN. Now, of course, not all of them have the same design as UST, so we'd have to evaluate them on a case-by-case basis. But for now, I'm bearish on all stablecoins with a seigniorage share model, so any project trying to make one, I'm hesitant on. Number 7, they always like to say, this time it's different, but very rarely is that true. LUNA supporters love to say this in particular. They love to point out that Terra had organic adoption from like the Chai app or other dApps in their ecosystem. The theory was that this demand would prevent LUNA from going into a death spiral, but that looked like pure hopium, and it didn't make any difference when the death spiral came. This also makes me wonder if the whole robust ecosystem narrative was even true, or if it was just complete fluff. Number 8, people got wrecked by listening to all the irresponsible advice out there. For example, some VCs told their portfolio companies to put their fundraising money into UST to earn yield on it. So a lot of startup founders did that, thinking that it was safe and that it was a stable coin. Turns out it was the dumbest decision ever, as their fundraising amount is now worth a fraction of their original amount, and they probably can't even pay their employees anymore. Number 9, speaking of VCs, they are not geniuses either. They're supposed to be smarter than the average retail investor, but a lot of them got an egg in their face too, such as Delphi Digital. They were long Luna like crazy. One of their founders was all in and he got absolutely wrecked.
So I'm very bullish Luna in that most of my net worth is in Luna and Luna alts, right? So that should tell you something about sort of my bullishness on Luna.
I'm so glad I didn't subscribe to their research reports and listen to them, because I'd probably be wrecked as well. Delphi was well known for being early on Axie Infinity, and they looked like geniuses for it. But perhaps that was partially luck, and you can't be right on everything. Number 10, you can't rely on bailouts in the crypto world. Some people thought that all these large funds behind Terra would jump in and bail them out if anything bad happened. Remember that potential deal where the Terra team was trying to raise funds from their backers in order to stabilize UST? Well, that never happened because the death spiral happened way too quickly and it didn't make sense for those firms to do that deal anymore. So point is, don't feel a false sense of security just because some big funds are backing a project. This isn't like the US government bailing out big banks with their unlimited dollars. Nothing is too big to fail in the crypto world. Number 11, my goodness, this whole thing unraveled way faster than I ever imagined. Of course, I thought a death spiral could happen, but Luna went from like $80 to less than a penny in a few days. It happened so fast that they couldn't really execute their plan to save the system. Remember how the Terra team gave their Bitcoin to some market makers to prop up UST? Well, I don't think they even had the time to use the BTC fast enough. The speed at which this whole thing happened was jaw-dropping. Number 12, I'm actually kind of glad that Luna collapsed when it did, because it's better to fail early than when it gets so big that it takes down half the crypto space with it. For example, there were several yield generating protocols that were milking Anchor yield for their customers. There were also projects using UST in other ecosystems, such as several Cosmos projects. And then Curve stablecoin pools that included UST were growing larger and larger. All these projects and users would have gotten even more wrecked if UST was larger and the contagion was more widespread. Number 13, you know what project actually went the opposite direction and got stronger from this whole fiasco? DAI. That's the stablecoin that Do Kwon said he would kill. DAI's governance token Maker actually pumped in price as Luna and UST were collapsing, because DAI utilizes a more conservative, over-collateralized model, whereas UST has no collateral backing it. DAI also has a much stronger track record, surviving through a really brutal bear market and never really losing its peg. Funny thing is that the MakerDAO's founder called UST out for being a Ponzi, but no one listened to him back then and they called him a hater instead. Number 14, the Bitcoin reserve that everyone thought would save UST was actually a terrible idea, because they're backing it with another volatile asset. Just think about it, they acquired their billions worth of Bitcoin when BTC was much higher in price. And then when the collapse started, their reserve was worth much less than before, so they had less to defend their peg with. Probably would have been better if they held it in dollars or something more stable. Number 15, this attack was always inevitable. There was a lot of discussion on Twitter about how some big entity was able to short Bitcoin, attack UST's peg, and profit 9 figures as a result. No idea who it was, but that's besides the point. The point is, our crypto protocols have got to be resilient to all sorts of attacks. Attacks are part of the game, and you can't assume everyone is going to be benevolent. So if your protocol is attackable, you best be sure that someone will try, especially if there's so much profit to be made. Number 16, speaking of the attacker, why is no one suspecting Sam Bankman-Fried and his Alameda crew? I could totally see them doing something this parasitic after all. This is half tongue-in-cheek, but someone made a meme saying that Alameda Research loves to dump coins on retails and go short while doing so. I know that's kind of rumors, but I believe it because their actions show that they only care about extracting money out of the space rather than building for the long haul. Number 17, let's admit it, the Terra Luna network was always centralized. A few days ago, their validators voted to stop the chain to prevent a governance attack. That's hilarious to me, because what about all those apps that were supposedly running on the chain, like the Chai app? Did they all just stop while the chain was paused? Or did they never really have any adoption so it didn't matter anyways? That's more likely the case in my opinion. Number 18, do not forget that Ethereum remains king of all layer 1s. All these hot new layer 1s like Terra come out thinking they're hot stuff. but eventually they all fall back down to earth, while Ethereum continues to prove itself as the safest, most organically adopted layer 1 blockchain with also the longest track record. Other hot projects will come and go, but I for one value ETH above them all. Number 19. Many of y'all are wondering what's next for LUNA and UST. Well, per the initial proposals, it looks like UST will be dropped completely from the next iteration of Terra and Luna. Perhaps they'll come back one day, but in a completely different form. Either way, if Terra/Luna ever comes back, they're gonna need real adoption and real growth, not some fake Ponzi-like returns powered by Anchor protocol. Number 20, catching falling knives is never a good idea, and we should fight the urge to do it. I'm gonna be honest, I bought some Luna when it was at like $15, thinking of it as a YOLO bet. But then I woke up to $2 Luna, and a few hours later, it was only a few cents. My bag is now worth pennies, but that's okay because I learned a valuable lesson that is worth remembering. Don't try to catch a falling knife. And also don't go short or long on anything with this much volatility. Even if you're right about the general direction, you could get liquidated by the huge price swings that are happening because the order books are thin. If you liked any of my 20 takeaways and perhaps learned something new, be sure to come chat with us in our Telegram group using my link below. Also watch this video on why I gave up on Solana after loving them for a long time. See ya!